From the bottom of the oceans to the highest peaks, the Earth has been explored, mapped out, and classified. But there remains a place beyond the limits of the known world, of which we barely know anything. A place where one can still entertain dreams of exploration, the underground world. Adventurers Damien and Francois Xavier are about to join up with a caving expedition in the center of British Columbia. The challenge that awaits them on the high limestone plateaus is no less than beating the Canadian record for the deepest cave. To accompany them on this underground adventure, they've invited Belgian caver Nicolas Borchers. It's a solid team for a gigantic enterprise.
Here we go!
We are on another adventure. Seems this isn't your first time exploring a cave together.
Yeah, we actually met in a cave. We were 15. Yeah, it's been a while, huh?
Yeah, and it was on the other side of the planet.
It's crazy.
Just incredible.
The final destination for our three adventurers, White Rabbit Cave. At 450 meters deep, it's the fifth deepest in Canada. But the exploration team waiting for them on site think they've found a way to surpass 1,000 meters. And at the same time, beat the North American record by over 400 meters for depth.
Welcome, Kirk. Yeah, Fix. Nice to meet you.
Biologist Kirk Safford, expedition leader, welcomes the team to the base camp. They're pied de terre for the next 10 days.
How was the flight?
Yeah, it was brilliant. I love that turn just before the landing.
Yeah.
Without wasting a minute, the adventurers are briefed on the exploration plan.
And the depth potential is over a kilometre.
Well, the whole drop all the way down is, you can't see the top of it, like really hard to see.
Yeah.
So all the way down, it's narrow, but it's really super high.
One type of rock in particular allows for the existence of vast underground worlds, limestone. Limestone covers nearly 10% of the planet's surface and harbors the vast majority of caves. Limestone is composed of minerals mainly derived from the skeletal remains of marine organisms and former coral reefs. Indeed, these cliffs were formed at the bottom of the ocean. Once pushed out of the water by tectonic forces, these rocks were assailed by the forces of nature, like wind and rain, by erosion, in other words. Rivers that flow over limestone have a nasty habit of disappearing. The water flows as far down as the rock will allow it. Once it reaches harder layers, it changes course and meanders along its merry way to the heart of the mountain. Over time, the water ends up digging a maze of tunnels that sometimes spreads out over kilometers. Caves are much more than just a series of dark passageways. Even in the most extreme environments, life always finds a way to take root. And caves are no exception. It's one more reason for humans to explore the world beneath their feet.
We need two lights, right?
Yeah, your headlamp and an emergency light.
Apparently the cavers explored two caves that might be connected.
Exactly. 2 caves. They first explored White Rabbit Cave.
The famous White Rabbit?
That's the lower cave with the huge entrance.
Okay.
They weren't able to find the end of it, but they found another cave higher up, which they christened Over the Hill.
So we'll explore the lower cave while the other team explores the top one. And we're hoping to meet up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Problem is, we'll need to dive to go from one cave to the other. There's a sump.
Okay.
It's up to the diving team to dive and try to get to the known part of White Rabbit Cave.
Excellent. It's a huge challenge, eh?
Yeah.
I think FX took the food.
Yeah, he did.
Okay, perfect.
I think we're getting closer.
What makes you say that?
The place fits the description the cavers gave us. We're in this marshy area. They told us to walk towards the skyline until we got to a cliff with a river running through it. You see that limestone band? The white band?
Yeah?
Well, if we just follow it, it will lead us directly to the cave entrance.
Oh, so we just have to follow the direction of that layer. Ah, the branches are whipping my face. Can you get through?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, it's a jungle.
Wow. Isn't that amazing?
Wow, incredible.
It's kind of intimidating.
Intimidating is the word, all right.
White Rabbit is one of the crown jewels of Canadian caving. The gaping mouth of this rock giant swallows up the river that our 3 adventurers were following. They now plunge into darkness without really knowing what awaits. Cavers may always know when they enter an underground world, but they rarely know when they'll re-emerge from it.
So what kind of rock is this, Nicolas?
Actually, FX, all the major caves are made of limestone. Limestone is slightly soluble, when the water is a bit acidic, that is. So it allows the water to dig the galleries and caves that we're now climbing down into.
How old is this cave, Nicholas?
The caves in the Rocky Mountains are several 100,000 years old. I mean, their formation began way back then.
And it took forever, eh?
Absolutely. And it's still happening. You hear that river? It's still doing its work. To give you an idea, when this cave began to be formed, Homo sapiens didn't yet walk the earth. So it all starts with water. Rainwater, to be more precise. And when that rainwater falls, it will go through the ground, absorb carbon dioxide, or CO2, which will make it slightly acidic.
You mean the CO2 that's emitted by the roots of plants?
Exactly, and by the breathing of the organisms in the soil. So the soil is fairly rich in CO2, and that CO2 will dissolve in the water when the rainwater penetrates into the ground.
So CO2 plus H2O?
Equals carbonic acid. It's not a very strong acid, but over time, carbonic acid can erode limestone. This erosion doesn't happen overnight, of course. But like we said earlier, the caves are several hundreds of thousands of years old. So over time, erosion can lead to the formation of huge caves.
It's too dark. Should we shine a light?
Good idea.
Good idea. Let there be light.
Oh, much better.
We can see where we're going now. Wow, it's still treacherous though.
Speaking of cave formations, you sometimes see stalactites and stalagmites. How exactly are these formed?
For stalagmites and stalactites, it's sort of the reverse process of the cave formation we discussed earlier. Remember what happens when water combines with carbonic acid?
Yes?
It will dissolve the limestone. Now imagine the rainwater making its way through the rocks and emerging here, over you in the roof. When it comes into contact with the cave's atmosphere, it will lose its carbonic acid. It's like when you open a bottle of sparkling water. The bubbles escape. Since the water contains less carbonic acid, it can't hold as much as limestone. And that limestone is redeposited. And that's how stalagmites and stalactites are formed.
Well, I think the question on everyone's lips is, why do people explore caves?
There's millions of reasons, but I think the main drive is curiosity. When you're standing before the gaping mouth of a cave, you wonder what's behind it, how far it goes. I think that's what motivated the first explorers.
Well, I think it's been like that since the dawn of man. We've always been curious to see further, and science and exploration have always gone hand in hand.
And it's not over. The first explorers were most often scientists, and it's still the case today.
It's an amazing symbiosis between science and exploration.
Many of today's cavers are geologists, hydrologists, and even biologists.
It becomes fascinating when you bring biology into it. Few people would imagine that there's life in a cave, but there's a whole biological world here.
Exactly. It's not only rock. For example, in this handful of sand, there could be bacteria and microorganisms that we know very little about.
Caves are the kingdoms of arthropods. Arthropods are champions when it comes to adapting. In the near total absence of light and food, along with bacteria and fungi, to establish a complete underground ecosystem. Mammals, too big and energy-guzzling, are usually excluded from this small world. But one remarkable mammal is an exception to the rule. These biologists have come here in the middle of a Rockies winter to find bats.
So there's a bat just up here on the wall.
The biologists are looking for the carcasses of bats rather than living bats, yet they hope not to find any. Dead bats might be a sign of a European-born disease known as white nose syndrome. The epidemic hasn't yet reached Alberta, but some say it's only a matter of time.
It's just really weird, though. It's white there. Yeah. Just not seeing anything on the muzzle. I think we should open the wing up and see if there's any damage on the wing. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's even worthwhile having it tested.
Well,
there is some white substance on the wing, which is unusual. And it's concerning in that white nose is a fungal infection that affects the wings as well as the face.
I've never seen this before. It was hibernating, and it's come out of that now. It's waking up, and that's the big cost of the white nose syndrome, the fungus that gets into their deep muscle tissues. They just keep waking up through the winter until they have no more energy left, and then they die that way. So,
our biologists would end up concluding that the fungus found on the wings of the bat was not white nose syndrome. If it had been, it would have been disastrous for Canada's bat populations. When the disease reaches a colony, the chances for survival are near zero.
24th of January, 2013. On the snow here, we found some dead bats and some dying bats, like that one, just stuck frozen with its back of its head to the snow, right there. And there's the one there in the snow it just flew over from the cliff face. You can see the one down here, it's basically right there, it's crawling around. Ah, poor buggers. Oh yeah, littered. Dead bats here everywhere. Dozens and dozens of them. All the way down here.
As of its 2006 detection in the state of New York, the fungus which causes white nose syndrome spread across North America at dazzling speed. It crossed the border in 3 years. In 10, it reached 31 states and 5 Canadian provinces. The bat colonies were exterminated one by one without anyone knowing how to stop it.
As far as we can tell, white nose syndrome has caused the fastest decline of wild mammals that's ever been recorded. Millions of bats have died all throughout eastern North America. So our team is doing counts at these colonies all across central Canada. That's really useful data for us that give us a snapshot of the health of the population, and then we can monitor trends in the population over time as the fungus comes through.
I see one in the second chamber. He doesn't love this light, though.
Paul is putting up a funnel trap, and so what we're hoping is that the bats are going to jump out of their house into the bag thinking they can get through the bottom, but then they'll be trapped inside. It'll be really easy, and you just take the bag off and just pull them right out of the bag.
While Kaylee and her students get ready to conduct a series of tests on the captured bats, the rest of Dr. Willis's team are assigned with taking the count of a nearby bat box. It's a game of patience and concentration. When the moths start coming out, their biggest predator is never very far away.
We're hearing a lot of activity in there now, so it should start picking up soon.
There's one.
Whoop.
And so begins the bat ballet. Through the miracle of evolution, bats are the only mammals in the world that can fly. This unique trait has allowed them to diversify like no other. There are about 1,300 bat species in the world. 1 out of every 5 mammal species is a bat. These are called little brown bats. This species can live up to 45 years, quite a feat for an animal this size. And females only give birth to 1 pup per year. In fact, these traits are closer to a bear's than to a mouse's. And like bears, bats hibernate for a large part of the year, and that's where things get complicated.
During hibernation, an average little brown bat in central Canada has to survive for up to 8 months on about 2 grams of stored fat. To do that, they have to slow their metabolism right down. They slow body temperature down to just above freezing. But there's something about being a mammal and being cold for weeks and weeks on end that's incompatible. And so bats, about every 3 weeks, a healthy bat will spend a ton of energy, a ton of its winter fat, shivering and shivering to warm up to a normal body temperature for about 2 hours. One of those arousals for 2 hours costs about 3 weeks of fat. So if you're doing that too often, that could easily explain how they're running out of fat too quickly and how they're dying. And it's now clear from a number of experiments that that's what's going on. Something's happening as this fungus grows into the skin that causes bats to warm up too much.
Before in this cave, we could count 600 to 800 bats before the syndrome set in. But after the white nose syndrome, the count went down to about 75. That's almost a 90% drop in the population here. But part of the population seems to be surviving. Between 1 and 10% of individuals, We've noted that at the moment, the populations are starting to slowly bounce back.
We take a sample and we put it in a test tube.
That goes back to the lab. We'll send the samples to the University of Montreal lab so that Virginie Lemieux-Lamonté can analyze them. What she's looking at is the variety of organisms present on the bat's skin.
Some bats are surviving, but we don't yet know why. Given that the immune system is less active during the hibernation period, we're not favoring that hypothesis. However, the microbiome could be acting while the bat is hibernating. And we know that skin microorganisms evolve a lot faster than the genome of a species. In the populations that we studied that had survived, when we compared them with non-affected bats, we saw an enrichment in a certain bacteria that had the potential to fight white nose syndrome. We observed that in several individuals, so it seems to be a general trend. At the moment, there are several treatments and methods being considered to fight the fungus. We've isolated bacteria directly on the skin of the bats, and those were used to cure the disease. Chemical products have been considered, but we obviously haven't yet applied those treatments in the field because introducing something like that might cause an even worse imbalance.
Besides the huge practical constraints of a general treatment, we know the damage humans can do when playing chemist. Treating the colonies is therefore not yet an option. But Dr. Willis's team is on another lead.
That was very easy. We're going to take it to get weighed. We're going to swab its wings for white nose syndrome. We're going to take pictures of its wings if there's any damage. We're also going to take a small genetic sample and microchip that individual as well.
Yeah, we have boxes like that.
The reason that we punch holes is because we're taking a genetic sample. So one of the things that we want to understand through our studies is what makes a bat likely to survive white nose syndrome and what doesn't. And the process looks a little bit brutal, but it does heal up within 10 to 14 days. We don't like to cause them any harm, but it's kind of a pinch for the greater good, I guess.
We think one of the most likely traits that might be important for helping them survive is how fat they get in the fall. Those kinds of traits are heritable. So fat mother and father bats will tend to have fat baby bats. And if that trait is heritable and the fungus is selecting for bats that had the largest fat reserves at the beginning of hibernation, then evolution might be the answer to our problem. In conservation biology, we refer to that as evolutionary rescue. And in that situation, anything you can do to improve the survival and especially reproduction of individuals that have made it through your challenge, your human impact that's caused the decline, is going to help your population recover.
Some wing scarring. And it's a female. She's pregnant. You can definitely see the bulge for sure.
And so we've been testing how improving the habitats that mother bats use to raise their pups might help populations rebound and recover. We've known for decades that mother bats really like warm summer roost sites. And so we're actually artificially heating bat boxes to try and encourage occupation of bats in enhanced habitat and help populations recover. It's really an approach based on helping evolution.
So that is where she would have had some white nose syndrome growing on her that has eaten away at the tissue, and now she has a big scar there.
One of the things I'm always asked is why people should care about bats. One of the reasons I think they're important is that they're just cool and interesting and unusual, and they do bizarre things. But they're also ecologically and economically important animals.
Because they eat so many insects, bats are of great service to humans, especially in the agri-food sector. The collapse of bat populations has already cost the industry several $billions worth of pesticides. It's yet another example of our dependence on nature. Now we can only hope, like Dr. Willis, that evolution will work its magic on the species. In White Rabbit Cave, FX has met up with expedition leader Kirk Safford. Meanwhile, Damien and Nicholas will continue exploring the cave.
Oh, it's a tight squeeze, Damien.
We're going through there?
Yeah, man.
You sure?
If I get stuck, you'll pull me up on my feet?
Okay, it's a deal.
So, light breakfast today?
We'll soon find out. Some butter might come in handy.
You realize we have a better knowledge of the surface of Mars and the ocean depths than we do of caves. We've mapped out Mars. We even have a knowledge of the ocean depths, even of underwater canyons. But we have no way of knowing where unexplored caves are located on the planet. And the only way to learn about them is by exploring them directly, by squeezing through little holes like this.
Speaking of Mars, I never thought about going there, but the idea seems more and more appealing.
Can't be worse than here.
No, it can't.
Can you believe that there are thousands of places like this, just waiting to be discovered?
Tons of tiny spaces like this.
Whole world of horrendous little holes just waiting to be discovered by us. I think it's amazing.
I appreciate your passion, Nico.
Okay, I'm out.
You got through?
Yeah, a really tight squeeze.
And we're going back this way?
Naturally.
Great.
It's too late now. You're on the other side. Going through that narrow space was really worth it.
Wow.
Look how beautiful it is.
Is that marble?
Yeah, white marble.
Yeah, definitely worth it.
Let's just not think about the return.
Not yet. So what's up next?
I think we've arrived at the terminal. You remember all the unexplored zones Kirk showed us on the map?
Marked out with question marks?
Yeah, exactly. And get out the map and check.
Okay, it'd be nice to know where we are.
Think we're lost? Look, we came in through here. That's the main tunnel entrance.
Yeah?
Then we walked as far as here. So I think we're right here.
Oh, there, by the question marks.
Exactly.
So all of this is unexplored?
Yeah, all these question marks. We don't know what's out there.
Great.
You can pick one and we'll check it out.
How about that one?
That one?
Shall we?
Let's do it.
Nico, it's incredible to think that no one's ever set foot here.
Yeah, it's nuts to think that every time you explore a new gallery, that it was waiting there in the dark and silence for hundreds of thousands of years. Then suddenly, we turn our headlamps on and here we are.
Yeah, at the heart of the mountain.
It's incredible.
It's like there's two types of rock here.
Yeah, isn't it beautiful? You see that white rock underneath? That's the base of the cave. It's marble, in fact.
The black and white layers?
Exactly. Those black streaks, like in your bathroom.
I wish.
That's marble. And this bottom layer is impermeable. Water ran over this layer and eroded the limestone above, creating that meander where those two rocks meet. We can clearly see it here.
So the cave follows this layer of marble, and we're at the bottom of that layer.
Exactly. The whole cave follows the marble layer. We're always on that interface.
Excellent. Shall we keep going and see what's ahead?
Now that we've discovered this new gallery, Damon, we'll have to make a map.
So we'll record everything we explored on a map?
Exactly. Here's a disto for the distances, the notebook, and the other instruments. I suggest you take the instruments and I'll record the data in the notebook. The principle of topography is simple. It's a very basic science. We'll divide the gallery into segments and we'll measure the length of each segment, its direction and slope. We'll take those measurements for each segment and we'll jot them all down. And we can recreate the cave in 3D once on the surface. Okay, the station's right here, so aim for my hand. Not my eyes if possible.
6.65 meters?
6.65. 66. So far, so good. Exploration and map making have always gone hand in hand. When you think about sailors of bygone days who set sail for unknown worlds, when they discovered a new shore, it was important to map it out, so the next sailors wouldn't crash against the same reef.
It's like a legacy for future explorers.
Yeah, and that still holds true for modern-day caving. If you go back to the surface and tell your team, I found a gallery, if you don't bring back topographical data, it'll be pointless. No one will be able to find the gallery and push the exploration further.
It's probably even more crucial for the divers who will try to connect the two caves today.
Yeah, absolutely. Our divers will need to know exactly where they're headed, the distance from the sump to dive, and a map will give them the exact distance between the two caves.
10 years of dogged exploration have revealed over 5 kilometers of galleries under the mountain, and not one, but 2 caves, just 400 meters apart. It's only by connecting them that cavers will be able to claim a depth record. But as nothing is easy underground, the suspected passage is flooded. The only conceivable option is to dive. This year, an American cave diver has come to lend the team a hand. His objective is simple: to dive through the sump and connect the 2 caves. Jason disappears into the freezing cold water without the faintest idea of what he'll find there. He's the first human to come through here. In 2-degree water, and with extremely narrow passageways, the task proves difficult, with a slim chance of success. If the mission were to succeed, the 2 caves would become one, thus becoming the deepest in all of Canada and the U.S.
Kirk, you're a biologist for the government of BC.
That's correct.
As a biologist, what do you find so interesting about caves?
Well, I'm interested in caves overall and exploring caves and finding out where they go and what they do. The biology is a part of that. We really know very little about life inside these caves, so any chance I get, try and make some collections of the invertebrates. So I think we'll just look at some of this woody debris here, and I can see there's some fungal mycelium growth, and we'll just take a look, and maybe I'll collect some samples here and see if there's anything in there.
Let's do that. Let me know how I can help you.
Sure, certainly.
So what are you hoping to find here?
Well, sometimes you'll get springtails or mites that will live in here. It's a small predator prey system. Very
basic, I guess.
Very basic, yeah.
So who's the predator?
The mites are predatory. They'll feed on the springtails, but there's a number of other things. There might be fungus gnats on some of this, which may or may not be cave adapted.
The little nutrients that arrive in the cave, they come from the surface usually?
Frequently, yes. And you know, there's no primary production underground, so you don't have plants and no sunlight, and so.
And no sunlight means no plants, means no food.
That's right. There'll be some energy from, you know, the bacteria can probably create, you know, when they, like I say, they live off the limestone, they can.
So chemical.
It's part of the chemical reaction. They help create the flowstone, and there may be some species that live off those bacteria as well. So for this station, yeah, if you could put that back there, and we'll move on to another spot.
All things considered, studying microscopic insects at the bottom of a cave may seem altogether futile. But these two cavers will prove the contrary. They're known as citizen scientists. They've put their exploration talents to the service of science. With microbiologist Anne Cheatham, they might be on the verge, no more, no less, of redefining the medicine of tomorrow.
That's it, eh? That's it. Wow, look how low the snow is. Yeah.
Oh, it's always impressive.
Yeah, it's a big hole in the ground. Got all your screws, lots of screws. And the scientific gear, that's right.
The first thing that hit a lot of people when we step into the cave would be, oh my God, it's so dark. Darkness. What does it mean in the biological context? It means that there is no photosynthesis, there is no primary producer, which means the first cell that could give energy to other organisms in the same ecosystem. Basically, it's almost a starving environment in there, but you see a lot of lives. And then it dawned on me, how do these organisms actually make ends meet? So it means that they must have adapted and evolved so that they can live and thrive in that habitat. So I'm thinking, okay, they must have very interesting metabolic ability, which could mean that they could be, you know, the producer of a number of interesting and less studied molecules that we can extract and use as either drugs, antibiotics, or anything. So basically, when we want cave soil samples, some caving communities might, you know, have a new expeditions going into the type of caves that never been in before, and they will call my lab and say, hey, Anne, would you like to study these cave samples or not?
Bacteria are integral to our lives, like no other organism. The vast majority are indispensable to life on Earth. Others, however, can cause disease or poison or kill us. Luckily, humans discovered antibiotics, which allowed them to ward off these infections. But today, the situation is again changing. In Montreal, in the winter of 2016, 25 people contracted a new type of bacterial infection. These patients died because no antibiotic could save them. Superbacteria had entered the scene.
Using antibiotics saves human lives, so they're important and necessary. But the widespread use of antibiotics will cause bacteria to fight back, too. Their goal in life is to multiply. So they have to develop mechanisms to try to foil the antibiotics that have been developed. It's natural selection, meaning that there's a selective advantage for antibiotic-resistant bacteria. To counter that, we developed even more powerful antibiotics. But yes, there are still cases now in Canada and in the world of bacteria that no antibiotic can kill.
The arms race was thus launched. Though alternative methods were developed, the scientific community is certain of one thing. We quickly need new types of antibiotics. And Ann Cheatham thinks she may know where to find them.
You know, strangely enough, majority of antibiotics actually, believe it or not, come from microorganisms found in nature. And I strongly believe that we still have to go back to the nature and find that molecules in the nature. I would like to see whether microorganisms that live in extreme habitats would be able to produce new molecules for us that we can use as antibiotics.
It's quite fascinating to see this huge hole in the side of the mountain. And from the entrance, you can't tell, but about one rope length in, all of a sudden you see this beautiful blue ice with these humongous ice pillars and columns halfway down. And the ice in this cave is phenomenal. I remember when we first came into the cave, it really struck me how clear it was, because when you're traveling around, your headlamps are shining into the ice and you can see rocks and bubbles buried 2-3 meters deep in the ice, and which is a bit disconcerting when you're walking on it. It's like walking on water. I love exploration. I love the idea of going somewhere no one has ever been. And so luckily this cave was able to offer that. You know, I've got to see a piece of the world that no human's ever been to, and that's pretty rare nowadays.
It's just an amazing thing to be an amateur at doing scientific work, but yet to be able to contribute to the scientific community by either collecting samples or by being an explorer or going to a new place that no human has ever been. And to be able to share any results that you find with the scientific community is just the gravy on top.
Yeah, it's so weird to see snow down here after all that ice. Yeah, this actually looks pretty good because it looks like it's deep enough that we can dig down, which is what we'll need to do. So we've got these sterile instruments we can use to dig. So we can start digging just around there. Can use the end of that. We'll see what might be living here.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if she's had any success finding organic or bacteria in other samples, other caves?
Oh yeah, for sure. So some of the samples that we did in some of the other caves, they were able to isolate a bunch of new bacteria that had never been observed before. And of those, they had some success in testing them against a drug-resistant strain of staph infection.
I really like the color. This one is from what cave again?
This is from this
White
seven
Rabbit.
caves, White Rabbit caves.
White Rabbit caves, yeah. When you observe, we call it clear zone here or inhibitory zone here, which means that these cave bacteria producing metabolites that can kill the bad bacteria that we use to test. So in this set of 20-some cave bacteria that we test, we actually found this one and this one that show potential activities, and from now we're going to do secondary screening. We will grow these bacteria in large amount and then test them further to see whether this would be a good candidate for new antimicrobial activities. It could take minimum of 10 years to 25 years the most to actually make this compound from the lab right now into a commercially available antibiotic for everyone to use. Even though I know that, there's still a long road ahead of me, but just to see that spot in the plate is kind of, you can never forget that feeling.
Two happy cavers emerge from the ice cave. For them, it's mission accomplished. At White Rabbit, however, the situation isn't as sunny. After advancing for half an hour, Jason faces the nightmare of all cave divers. Atrocious visibility, a steep and unstable sand slope, and a space barely 30 centimeters high to slip through. When it's a choice between the mission and safety, it's an easy decision. The diver makes a U-turn.
Well, that would be short. Got about 50 to 70 meters of passage, and it goes up and down a couple of canyons, and then at the end it comes up into a sand slope that's right at the angle of repose. So as soon as you touch it, the sand collapses in on top of you, and it's probably 2-3 inches high. So that's it, huh? Well, time's gone like everything else went. What's that? Got into a 30 feet deep, and at the bottom turned into a collapsing sand slope with about 2 inches of clearance at the top.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, as soon as I touched it, it went and started burying me. I'm like, oh no, we're out of here.
Oh, wow.
So it didn't connect.
Well, there you go. That is
Okay.
significant. Even if it didn't go, the fact that we know.
Yeah.
Is,
yeah.
I really didn't know what to expect. It would have been awesome if it had kept on going, but at the same time, I knew there was little chance of that. Just the fact that we know that it's no longer an option, that we can't get there underwater, means that we can now move on to other things. So it does count for something, just the fact of knowing.
Hey, you guys did a great job exploring this place. Nice passageway.
FX, Nicholas, and Damien have reached the deepest section of the cave. Along the way, they also found the river they'd left at the cave entrance. When a river runs underground, you rarely come out dry.
I have a lighter? Oh, wait, I have one.
Great teamwork.
Perfect. It's quite a feeling finding ourselves down here, huh?
Yeah, it would take several hours to get back to the surface.
Yeah, the distance isn't that much, in fact. In a beeline, we're only a few hundred meters from the exit.
But we'll have to backtrack all day tomorrow. Through all those narrow spaces.
Back up the waterfall.
Yeah, that's the undertaking. Contrary to popular belief, caving isn't an extreme sport. It isn't a dangerous sport. It's actually relatively safe. But if something happens, if you sprain an ankle or break an arm down here, yeah, it's very hard to get out.
A chopper can't come rescue you at the bottom of the cave.
No, it's not like in the mountains.
Not bad.
It's nuts how everything tastes good underground. Yeah, actually, I'd never eat this at home.
I don't think I'd appreciate it that much on the surface.
You guys ever sleep an entire night in a hammock?
I don't know.
Never in a cave.
I don't like the look of this.
It's the end of a long day of exploration for our three adventurers.
I'm wrapped up like a sausage.
Cut off from the outside world by hundreds of meters of rock, they're settling in for a good night's sleep in the total darkness of the underground world.
Oh man, the ceiling's just gorgeous.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
The hallways of White Rabbit are again plunged in darkness and silence.
Hey, good night, guys.
Good night, guys. I wonder what they're doing up there.
A geometric patchwork of farming operations extending to the horizon. The Canadian prairies were not always like this. There was a time when plains, rivers, and hills blended harmoniously under an endless sky. A time when only bison roamed the plain by the millions. This recent footage, however, is proof that all is not yet lost. This is Grasslands National Park.
Incredible. It extends to the horizon as far as you can see.
Damien and Francois Xavier are flying over the farms of southern Saskatchewan. Their destination is one of the rare ecosystems that have been preserved in their natural state in this part of the prairies. This is Grasslands National Park.
Below us is a landscape that, let's admit it, is far from being in its natural state. Yet most of us have come to know the Canadian prairie landscape this way. Obviously, it hasn't always been like this. Not so long ago, this place harbored a complete, varied ecosystem with its large predators and the entire chain of life resulting from it. Damien, look what's on the horizon.
Oh, fantastic. We're approaching Grasslands National Park.
Emerging from a sea of farmland, the pristine hills of Grasslands National Park are revealed under the wings of our adventurers.
Incredible, huh?
What a difference.
What a contrast. It's crazy. Wow. It's a bit like the African savanna. It's incredible. The depth of those valleys, they're really carved out.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine that it only took 100 years to change it that much.
Yeah. For this adventure, we'll try to cross Grasslands National Park, one of the last bastions of unspoiled nature, on horseback. We'll discover nature that's pristine but also, unfortunately, fragile. We'll also try to better understand the historical connection between the prairies and humans.
Vast open stretches, soundless and monotonous spaces. The grasslands are an emblem of immensity and silence. Yet the landscape is not as desolate as it appears. Damien and Francois Xavier have actually just entered one of the largest and most productive ecosystems in North America. We will discover that the prairies are a world where every animal, every plant, and every creature has its own unique and indispensable place in a long chain of life stretching through space and time. At the origin of this large web of life is a single, humble organism: grass. Grass covers a quarter of our planet. It is found in every place on Earth where there is just enough rain for it to grow, but not enough to support a forest. It is the basis of all life in the prairies. Damien and FX are joined by biologist Danielle Fortin for a horseback ride across Grasslands National Park. Their guides are two men born on this land, Don Gillespie and Dennis Lamott.
We're going to take you guys out on a little ride here, but before we do that, we want to kind of brush up on your horsemanship skills a little bit.
That's a good idea.
We'll show you how to saddle these horses, and then we'll let you do it yourselves, gain a little experience, a little bit of confidence, and then we'll go through some safety things to make sure that everything goes pretty smooth, because the idea here is to have fun and be safe. So we're going to try to keep everybody as safe as we can.
Great.
Sounds good.
Let's try the saddle.
Let's do it.
Okay, get right up close. Good stuff. All right, up you go. Oh, there, just like a champ. And to put the bridle on, up between their eyes, touching their head, and reach here and take hold of it like that. On it goes, up over both ears. We like to do that up just enough so that the bridle can't fall off, but not tight enough to restrict their airflow, and so they're comfortable.
Okay.
That's your communication to the horse.
Right.
If you wanted to stop, you pick up on it. If you wanted to turn, so all of your communication runs through that bit.
Okay, now you don't want that chain in this. There you go.
We go back in.
Yep.
Just like that, you're ready to go. Ready to go, cowboy.
And we're leaving on a new adventure.
Yeah, on horseback this time.
It's quite different from what we're used to, huh?
So different. We're working with an animal and its temperament. Are you all right on a horse, Danielle?
Yeah, I'm all right. Getting used to it. Yeah, we're lucky to be in the Grasslands National Park and to have a chance to see what the prairies were like 100 years ago, or even more. The park's location was chosen on that basis. There were many unspoiled places here.
I was going to say, we just flew over the area in a plane, and it was very obvious. We flew over an endless patchwork of cultivated fields before getting to the grasslands.
Exactly, a little oasis. Why are there so many endangered species in this park?
Many of these species are found north of the northern limit of their distribution range, so the populations here are actually quite small.
So more fragile?
Yeah, much more fragile. For smaller populations, conservation efforts have to be more intense.
Restoration work in the park was begun in the 1980s, but the relationship between humans and the prairies dates from much longer ago. For millennia, the prairies were inhabited and maintained by tens of thousands of indigenous people, living alongside herds of bison. The vast majority of the original inhabitants of this land were wiped out by colonization and epidemics, and the soil of the prairies is now blanketed with the scars of the past.
This is an old native grave site, burial site. You find most of these grave sites on top of the hill, kind of like on a high point. And we believe that's just so that they're closer to the maker when their spirit leaves. These graves, they're not very deep because like the rudimentary tools that they had. And this is a really good example of a hammer that they made. They put this groove in here with hot water and they grind it with another rock and chip it out of there so that they could put their stick around it and like the handle around it. Could be used for war, or could be used for driving stakes or breaking bones to get the marrow out of them, things like that.
It seems empty when you look at the prairies, but there's so much history around.
Yeah, like cultural history, there's lots of it if you know what to look for. There's teepee rings on every ridge where they, like probably come back and camp at the same spot every year because the rings were already made and the stones were there. They didn't have to gather them again. My heritage here with the 100 years that we've been here is just a minute part of the big picture, like they've been here forever.
The disappearance of the First Nations brought with it the disappearance of an ancestral tradition, connecting humans to the prairie like nothing else could have. The use of fire as a way to manage the environment. Today, the Grasslands National Park Fire Brigade is on a mission. Weather conditions are perfect. No special alerts, moderate winds, and no reports of fire. Yet there is tension in the air. These fire experts have set out not to protect the grasslands from fire, but to burn them. Captain Matt Johnson is in charge of the project.
We try to apply fire to the landscape every year. How much is really dependent on the weather and the plans we write and what we can do both safely and financially responsible as well.
This might be the first time that setting fire to nature could be called financially responsible. Yet the fire plan was carefully honed and studied by the park and landowners to the benefit of everyone.
What I like most and what I enjoy most about doing this job is, you get to be outside and, you get to see what the results are of your prescribed fires. And it's a really fun experience and an awesome part of working for Parks Canada.
Controlled burns in the park have stunningly beneficial results. In reality, fire is an essential component of the grasslands ecosystem, and park employees are simply replicating in a controlled way what nature would have done anyway.
This is one of our portable weather stations here at the Jagovia Prescribed Fire Area.
The park's mission is to burn an average of 75 hectares per year. That's the equivalent of over 100 football fields.
So everything's looking good, all lined up. Should be good to go.
Great.
Guy behind me, he's just helping establish that guard. Just removing some of the fuels in around the fence and in around this unit, which will just help us better control the fire situation. Wind is looking good. We have an average of about 12 right now, and our temperature and relative humidity are looking pretty good as well. So I'm just going to do some rough calculations.
The figures are not to be taken lightly. Misinterpreting the meteorological data could easily lead to disaster. All it would take is for the wind to change direction, for the fire to get out of control. The torches are filled with flammable liquid, the water hoses are tested, and the fire is lit. These men have perfected the art of using the wind to push the flames in the direction they want.
Yeah, bring it right up here. There you go. There you go.
The flame front is then stopped, either by a road or by one of the fire breaks previously carved into the grasslands. If anything should go wrong, the control team is there to contain the flames. By removing the dead grass from the year before, the fire helps the new shoots to emerge from the ground to create a more lush and nutritious grassland. That way, the fire controls the vegetative mix. While local species survive the flames, most invasive plants are destroyed. So grasslands that are regularly burned will be healthier and more sustainable. The fire management brilliantly pulled off by park employees is certainly nothing new. An English surveyor passing through in 1792 spent several days on horseback without seeing a single section of unburned grassland. He wrote, "One place or the other is constantly on fire." Fire was one of the First Nations' most valuable tools. There is nothing left of the grassland but an expanse of smoking ash. At winter's end, the dry, monochrome prairie comes to life once again. The hills, yellowed by the cold, take on a mantle of flowers and lush grass. And from the ashes left by the fire rises an invincible force. Due to the fact that it grows from a protected part at the base of its stem, grass is practically immortal. Fire was so valuable to native peoples because the regrowth of the grasslands inevitably attracted their major source of food, bison.
See that?
Oh, there's one. And there's one right behind. And there are two more. There must be some in that dip.
We're almost surrounded by bison.
Should we crawl? It's incredible how big their heads are. And their horns. And also their beards. It's amazing.
The females are about 2/3 the size of males.
Yeah, wow.
In fact, a male can weigh up to a ton.
The older the animal, the longer its beard?
Yeah. And in a mature male, the space between its horns, on top of its head, is covered in fur. In an individual around 2 to 3 years old, that space isn't completely filled with fur.
So you can tell the age by the amount of fur.
Absolutely.
Their body shape is impressive. The way it starts small in the back and gets huge in the front.
Yeah, with a big hump.
And look at the way they roll in the dirt.
Yeah, that behavior we think is for protecting themselves from mosquitoes or insects in general. But it's also a social behavior where they display to what degree they're superior and dominant over others. Basically, they show each other what they're made of, in a way.
And it looks like they've lost their winter fur.
Yes, it often falls off in clumps. They may lose some of it when they roll in the dirt, but they will eventually shed their winter coats completely.
It's the end of the winter.
Yeah.
So they just lost their fur.
Yes.
They just had their young.
Yes. We usually see them sometime in April or early May. It's somewhere around then.
Oh, so they must be 2 months old at the most.
Yeah.
The daily movements of the free-roaming bison of Grasslands National Park take them to where the grass is greenest, with no regard to predators or hunters. Like mirages from another time, they open a window onto a past where, from east to west, bison roamed the North American plains in the millions.
The bison we see haven't always been here. They've been reintroduced. They were taken from the Elk Island National Park and released here in 2005. 71 bison. The plant communities here are very, very different from the other park.
So they arrived in unknown territory.
Yes, totally unknown. So we obviously wondered, how would they use the park? They managed to find the plants we have here, a kind of feathergrass and blue grama grass. These are plant communities that maximize their energy gain. They're very digestible and quickly consumed. That really shapes the way the bison will use this environment.
Are there other factors that encourage the bison to spread throughout the park?
Fire is a very, very important component. I don't know if you can see the dead part of the vegetation from last year.
Yeah, very dry.
That's right. A bison that consumes the food here, the vegetation, will eat only the green part. But imagine if fire had gone through here. All the dead parts would be burned. Not only that, but the nitrogen and nutrients in general that are contained in this material will return to the soil and be available for the plants that will grow. You'll have a nice green carpet here. Obviously, there are frequent fires here naturally. And not only that, but the first humans here used fire to attract bison. Bison can run 60 kilometers an hour, so it was hard.
You have to find them.
Yeah, so instead of finding them, you can draw them towards you. If you burn grasslands, the bison will quickly smell in the air and follow it. It gives them an idea of where they can find very tender green grass. So instead of having to run after the bison, because at that time they had no horses, they attracted the bison, which became easier to hunt.
What I find interesting is that you're drawing a picture of an ecosystem of which humans are 100% part of.
Yes, absolutely. Along with fire, humans have always had a major impact on this ecosystem. According to the Canada National Park Act, it's important to maintain the integrity of ecosystems, the ecological integrity. What is ecological integrity? It's a little arbitrary. We know there was a glacier here. Clearly what's here came after the glacier. So starting from that point, do we decide that suddenly that's what we want? That we've attained integrity? It's a little arbitrary, but they decided in many cases that it was when the Europeans arrived. So it's not the changes that the First Nations people made that we're trying to correct in this park, but rather the pastures and plants people planted in the 30s. We're trying to get rid of those plants now.
Fire makes the grass grow back. The grass attracts and feeds the bison, and the bison provides sustenance for humans. It seems picture perfect. Yet before bison meat could actually feed the indigenous people, they needed to kill the bison. But how can you take on an animal weighing over a ton with bows and arrows? That's what the travelers will find out. By following the Frenchman River and continuing south through the Badlands to the south of Grasslands National Park, the travelers reach the highlands overlooking the valley. From here, the view stretches far, and with a bit of imagination, they can practically see teepees in the distance, and men hunting bison on the high slopes of the plain. The horsemen now have an appointment with history.
So Don, what is this?
This is an ancient buffalo jump that was used by the native people as a slaughterhouse.
Wow. So they would actually push the bisons.
They constructed drive lines, which are little cairns of rocks, to create a funnel effect so that they could encourage a group of bison into this funnel. And as the bison moved towards the buffalo jump, the people that were hid behind these rock cairns would jump up and spook the bison and encourage them, keep them going in the same direction. And with the drive lines, it created that funnel effect so that as they kept them going the right direction, and the closer they got to the buffalo jump, the closer together the lines came, creating more pressure on the bison.
The chances for survival of the animals caught in the trap were slim. Overcome with panic, caught up in a mad rush, the bison plunged headlong towards certain death.
And when they hit the bottom, they'd be incapacitated some way, like broken legs, broken backs, made it easy to dispatch them and then harvest the meat.
Would the whole herd go over the hill?
I think that they tried to concentrate on smaller herds, because there's no sense of killing 50 bison if all you can use is 5.
So what would they do with the meat? Because like there would be way too much meat all at once, right?
They'd cut it into thin strips, like probably 1.5 inches, 2 inches wide and thin, and then hang it to air dry it.
Sounds like the original jerky.
I guess where the idea come for jerky, but they didn't have salt and sugar and smoke flavor and all that kind of stuff put in it. They'd take a stone mortar and grind the dried meat, berries and bison fat into a paste kind of affair, and then they put it in leather bags and sealed it, and it would keep for years.
That's a pretty smart way to hunt, yeah?
It sure beats chasing them around trying to shoot them with a bow and arrow. Oh, Maudie, are you getting tired, Maud? My Maudie mule getting tired? There's a good mule. There's a good old mule. Ah, there you go.
Let's heat it up a bit. What was your favorite part of the day? Tough question, huh?
No, it's not bad.
Yeah, not bad at all.
The sunset, eating dinner together at the camp.
The steak. And check out that light. Okay, let's see about this steak.
Yes.
Second one. Those steaks are huge. Hey, Don.
How's it look?
It's looking pretty. It's smelling good. You guys probably don't know it, but you're really lucky to live here.
Yeah, I like to know people things.
Yeah, and no noise.
No noise.
Yeah. Just
No
yourself and the hills and the grass.
Well, they say this is one of the darkest places on Earth.
Wow. I can't wait to see the stars.
Yeah, well, hopefully the sky will let you at night.
Should be pretty clear.
Yeah. It's rated as one of the one of the top 3 quietest places in the world and one of the top 2 darkest places in the world, like the Dark Sky Preserve.
It's got everything, huh?
The sun sets over the prairie, and the world of night takes its place. The place deserves its title of Dark Sky Preserve. The firmament is as enchanting to the travelers as the sirens were to Ulysses.
So there's the tip of the handle of the Little Dipper, which looks a lot like the Big Dipper, but it goes in the other direction.
As dark as the sky gets, there comes a time when the sun makes its return. While the bison are the mightiest, they are far from the only animals taking advantage of the grass of the vast plains. Discovering the other ones, however, requires looking a little lower down. It's mid-April in southern Saskatchewan, and one of the biggest spectacles of the prairies is about to take place. The male sharp-tailed grouse have gotten together to determine which will be the dominant male. It's a dance contest. The rules aren't clear, but one thing's for sure. They have to stamp the ground as fast as their little feet will allow. The best dancer will attract the attention of the females and will be able to reproduce. The grouse use the same dance floors year after year. They're called leks. The grouse's annual spectacle is also the harbinger of the new season. Springtime sees the arrival of the next generation on the rejuvenated prairie. While the deer roam the plains under the rising sun, the prairie dogs stay cautiously next to their burrows. They also have young to protect and cuddle. Their offspring are born in the middle of winter, protected under the prairie ground. Prairie dogs live in colonies made up of kilometers-long burrows, akin to cities teeming with life. The parents, always on the lookout, have sensed an unusual presence.
One PD, one PD, one pup, one PD, one PD. We sit on a ladder for 3 hours in the morning, and we use our binoculars, and we scan inside the plot, and we count how many prairie dogs are in there, so we can estimate what the densities are of prairie dogs and how those are changing over time. So we work for the Calgary Zoo, for the Centre for Conservation Research, but this project is in collaboration with Parks Canada. We started working in 2007. We were looking to start reintroducing ferrets, but we don't just put ferrets out into the wild and hope that they survive. It's important that as a predator, we understand the population dynamics of their prey base, because ferrets are such a specialist predator of prairie dogs. But because the prairie dog is also a species of concern, we need to make sure that we understand the ecosystem that they live in. So it's a food chain that we're looking at rather than just the top of the chain in isolation. So we are baiting the traps with peanut butter and oats. Prairie dogs like peanut butter, so we put peanut butter and oats on the back of the plate. And then we test it to make sure that when they come in and they touch the plate, the door closes. And then once we trap them, we take them out and we weigh them and record their sex and their measurements. 1,120, 28.3, 60.6 maybe. So we spritz them with flea spray, and we're doing that because fleas are the vector for plague, which is a bacteria that they don't have any immunity to. And it's one of the biggest threats to ferret recovery and prairie dog conservation. We can recapture them later on and we can estimate their survival and learn about their reproduction and the factors that are influencing those dynamics. Oh, there's lots of them out there. They're a keystone species, which means that they're really important for the prairie ecosystem in which they live. And they're important because, like beavers, they engineer the landscape. So when you look out on the colony, you can see that they clip down the vegetation and you see all those mounds where they build burrows. And so that alters the prairie landscape and creates more habitat, more diverse habitat for other species to use. So here, this is a prairie dog burrow. You can see there's a nice clean runway down into the burrow. There's some scat, some prairie dog poop around. As you can see, they're herbivores. They eat vegetation. It's just grasses and forbs in there. I could hear him gobbling, like the prairie dog was talking. Down, we could hear him. They make sort of they kind of sound like little turkeys. They make a little sort of gobble, 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 gobble. Can you hear them? So these are nose prints from the prairie dogs. So after it rains and they're maintaining their burrows or building their burrows back up, they use their noses to push and sort of pack the soil to create that sort of volcano shape. Or one of the reasons for the volcanoes, I think, one is that it provides a little bit of elevation and they rely on each other for communication regarding predators coming onto their colony. So as you can see, if I'm down here, compare trap onto my burrow, I'm a little bit higher so they can see out over the landscape and see if predators are coming. The other reason is potentially for flooding, so that raises the entrance up a bit. So if the water's coming through, it's less likely that it will flood down in. So they're pretty crafty engineers, these prairie dogs. Is it taking photos?
Let's find out.
All right, in the middle of a motion capture. We set it so that it's triggered by the motion of any animal that walks by.
So 145 pictures?
Photos. Good. On all of the plots that we have visual counts and mark recapture plots on, we also have remote cameras, which are motion sensors. We are interested in the activity of the prairie dogs, but also about the occupancy of predators. So this is a photograph of a golden eagle. That we have eagles here in the park, and they're a predator, definitely a predator of prairie dogs. And we've got a coyote pup who is curious, looking right into the camera. And this is a really interesting one. We have a coyote and a badger. And we've caught this a few times on our cameras where the coyote and the badger appear to be hunting together. And people have seen this several times in the park. And we're not sure whether it's that they're helping each other or one is taking advantage of each other. But you'll see them together. Often the coyote will be sniffing and having its head in the burrow, and the badger is digging through the burrow.
Along with being eaten by most of the carnivores in the area, the small rodents also feed vegetarians. By constantly maintaining the colony's grass, they create a plant mix that appears to be a real treat for herbivores, like the pronghorn antelope and the hare. But the biggest fans will always be the other key prairie species, the bison. The herd walks nonchalantly over the colony, paying no attention to the rodents. But on the prairies, danger is never far away. A coyote. The alarm is immediately sounded in the colony, and the message passed from burrow to burrow. In record time, the young are protected and the threat carefully monitored. It won't be happening today. Sensing that it has been spotted, the coyote goes off to find its dinner elsewhere. The threat has been avoided. Summer has finally arrived in the prairies. With it comes a new intruder to the colony. In a landscape devoid of trees, an abandoned burrow is the perfect shelter for the burrowing owl. It also has young to protect. Like their neighbors, the prairie dogs, the chicks are born underground in the spring and remain under the watchful eye of their parents. Burrowing owls have developed long legs that allow them to run as well as fly. With such unobstructed views, the mounds of the colony are the perfect vantage point for spotting danger. The chicks take advantage of the afternoon breeze to try out their wings. In a few months, they'll be big enough to follow their parents and continue their migration south. For the last stage of their journey, Francois Xavier, Damien, and Daniel leave behind their cowboy friends and their horses in the east block of Grasslands National Park. Let's take a trip back in time. 100 million years should be enough. Before humans, before bison and prairie dogs, even before the continents separated, there was a thick jungle here with all its inhabitants. There doesn't appear to be anything left of that lost world. But whoever said appearances could be trusted?
Here's the Valley of the Thousand Devils.
What a view.
It does look diabolical.
Yeah. As you can see, there are lots of hills, and the area is very eroded by wind and water. And there's very little vegetation. The fact that there's little vegetation leads to further erosion. And since there's lots of erosion, the vegetation has trouble clinging on.
So it's a vicious circle.
Absolutely.
What's also interesting is the name Badlands. You can picture the colonists coming here looking for land to settle on and saying, this is bad land.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't plant crops, it's hard to get around, and you certainly can't raise livestock.
The three men meet up with paleontologist Emily Bamforth and her associate, Alexandra Demer.
Hello, guys.
Hi.
Hello. Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Wow, what is this?
This is the tail of a duck-billed dinosaur called Edmontosaurus. And we're just excavating the end of it right here.
Oh, wow. Do you know what's further in the ground?
We don't know yet. We're trying to find out. Would you like to try?
Sure. So the bone they're digging out, how old is it?
It's about 66 million years old. So from the bottom of this valley here up to the top of this hill, that's only about 300,000 years old.
Okay.
So that represents 300,000 years.
That would be young for you, I guess?
It is, but to put it into perspective, the last glaciation was only 100,000 years old. So that's 3 times as long. That's the amount of time it took to get from here, where we're standing, to the bottom of the valley there.
So you could pretty much read this valley as you would be reading a history book, huh?
Yep, there's lots of different chapters about the history of life preserved right here. So this is what I wanted to show you.
All right.
It may look like a hole in the ground, but it's got something really important in it.
All right, what should we do?
So we may have to start digging a little bit.
It's okay, I can do that.
Oh, I have something really exciting to show you here.
All right.
I'll just use my rock hammer here and get in a little bit deeper.
Could you tell us the steps involved in excavating a fossil?
Often, when the fossil layer isn't yet exposed, and we know there's one there, we have to use picks and shovels to expose a large swath of the cliff. Once you do that, there's a good chance you'll find exposed bones or bone fragments. If it looks interesting, it's worth it to start unearthing it using finer tools. It's important when you start unearthing it to keep the work surface really clean to see the bone. That's where the brushes come in.
It looks like some product has been put on this part of the rock.
We use the glue to fuse the bone parts that are already coming apart. This is another part of the vertebra, but it's already fragmented, so I applied glue. That way, it's easier to work around the bone and expose it gradually without worrying about losing bits of bone among the debris. Right now, we're trying to unearth a dinosaur, a herbivore that we call Edmontosaurus. We call it a duck-billed dinosaur, meaning the tip of its head had no teeth, but had a big beak that looks like a duck's bill. The entire animal was about 12 meters long, so much longer than your average house, and about as long as a T-Rex.
Well, at that size, could this animal have predators?
Absolutely. The Mesozoic was the age of dinosaurs. It was the age of the T-Rex. The Edmontosaurus shared its habitat with the T-Rex. Here's a tooth. It's much too small to be a Tyrannosaurus tooth, but it could be a raptor tooth, a relative of the Velociraptor. It probably had the same type of skull, fairly elongated, no bigger than a dog. But in a group of 5 or 7 individuals?
So it could have killed these dinosaurs?
Definitely.
So this is coal, as you can probably tell.
Yeah, it actually smells like coal. It smells like a cave.
All right, so what we're here for is actually this thin line of a lighter color.
Oh, that one here?
Yep. And what your finger is touching right there, that is the point in geologic time where dinosaurs disappear forever. That is called the KT boundary. So KT stands for Cretaceous Paleogene.
Okay.
So that's the last period of the dinosaurs and the first period in the age of mammals.
All right.
So that line there, the KT boundary, marks the dinosaur mass extinction. The reason that we know that it killed the dinosaurs is that it's rich in a mineral called iridium. And iridium is a mineral that we don't find on the surface of the Earth. So anytime that we find it, we know it's come from somewhere else. In this case, it came from a meteor.
Okay, so meteorites have a higher concentration of iridium?
That's right.
All right.
And so we have a concentration of iridium in that layer, and it's dated to the exact same time that there is a gigantic crater in the Gulf of Mexico. And so what that layer actually is the fallout from that meteor impact. And so we know that the meteor impact had some role in the extinction of the dinosaurs.
In the death of the dinosaurs.
And you'll notice that all this coal, this is basically all dead plant. And so when you had this massive impact crater, or the meteor hit, there would have been lots of forest fires and tsunamis, and things instantly would have evaporated. It was like 100,000 nuclear explosions all at once.
So below this layer, dinosaurs, above the layer, mammals.
That's right.
So the killing of the dinosaurs actually made way for a new species.
That's right. So 3/4 of life on Earth, plant and animal life, disappeared at this point in geologic history. And so when the ecosystems recovered, they were different. They were changed. And specifically, instead of dinosaurs, we started to get large mammals. So it's a really important geologic feature, and Southwest Saskatchewan is probably the best place in North America to study it.
Wow, we're lucky.
And actually, you can have another important Saskatchewan experience.
What now?
Would you like to taste the KT boundary?
Sure. Oh. Tastes like death.
Or barbecue dinosaur?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Under the scorching prairie sun, the men complete their adventure in what they thought was a lifeless desert. In nature, appearances can be deceiving. What seems dead is brimming with life. What seems free from human influence has been shaped 1,000-fold by man. And seemingly destructive fire is, in reality, a source of life. Glaciers are the largest freshwater reservoirs on Earth. Inching their way along like gigantic rivers of ice, glaciers have shaped Canada's landscape like no other force of nature. Powerful yet fragile, glaciers are a world unto themselves, a world just waiting to be explored, from the tallest peaks to the farthest icy depths.
We're now leaving the forest world and entering the world of mountains, eh? Past a certain altitude, you enter the mineral world. Wow, look at that. Just incredible.
Amazing.
Think we'll be able to climb over the glacier on the right?
We can always try, but we're not exactly traveling light.
Oh yeah? Did we have too much to eat?
Exactly.
In the wee hours, Damien and Francois Xavier embarked on a flight they would later describe as one of the most beautiful they've ever experienced. By leaving from Vancouver and heading north, they've reached the world of high mountains aboard their ultralight plane.
Oh, wow. Look at this. This is total freedom. We're the kings of the world.
Glaciers as far as the eye can see. Just amazing.
Our adventurers are off to explore the world of glaciers. Their objective for this expedition is to personally experience the glacier's long journey, from their formation on the highest mountains to their melting at the bottom of the valleys. This journey will provide a unique perspective on Canada's glaciers and an insight into the deep connection between glaciers and humanity.
The sun's out today. It's the middle of the summer here above the Coast Mountains in British Columbia. Yet the temperature inside the cabin is below 0 degrees Celsius. The reason being, quite simply, the altitude. Damien, we're at about 2,500 meters, right?
Yeah, we're at 7,000 feet.
So obviously, it's a lot colder here than in the valley. At this altitude, we have mountains, of course, but we also have glaciers. There's a gigantic glacier right under us. The view inspires admiration and respect, of course. But you have to remember that just a few decades ago, the ice level was a lot higher than it is now.
Notice how smooth the rock is on these mountains. That's the work of the former glacier. Several hundred meters of ice have retreated here. There is no disputing it. This is a sure sign of climate change.
The planet's glaciers are melting, and Canada's are no exception. But the glaciers haven't had their last word. Case in point, the Lillooet ice field. We're in western British Columbia. In this part of the world, the Lillooet ice field, 400 meters deep and covering 700 square meters, is definitely in the heavyweight category. Our adventurers will start here at the base of the glacier. Tagging along with them is glaciologist Christophe Kennard. The three men will spend an entire week on the ice field without assistance or the possibility of getting fresh supplies.
You must feel quite at home for a glaciologist.
Another day at the office.
Right, at the office.
That face is just awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
That face is Mount Bridge, the first objective of our mountaineers. The snow and ice-covered peak at over 2,900 meters above the ice field towers menacingly above the three men. The mere idea of reaching it seems highly unlikely to them. After attempting to climb the mountain, the three men plan on crossing the ice field and reaching the Bridge Glacier, thus following the ice path along its relentless downward descent.
We're almost there.
Wow.
Beautiful mountain, eh?
That's a big rock.
I'll say.
Very steep.
So how do we go about it?
We could get a bit closer to the mountain and then camp for the night. Sounds good?
Yeah.
Hey, Damien and I have something to tell you, Christophe.
Oh, yeah?
We did some research and no one's ever climbed this face.
Is that right?
So if we get to the top, we get to name the route.
It's a first?
Yeah.
Excellent.
You can pick the name.
You can start thinking of one.
Okay, I'll get on it.
Do you snore?
Not usually.
Same here. Good night, guys.
Good night. Time to get up. Sleeping was hell. It was so hot.
How's it going, guys?
Great.
Isn't it?
Beautiful here. A few rocks, a bit of ice, a bit of snow.
Yeah, beautiful line.
And it goes straight up.
We're not far from the pass.
Pretty steep slope, huh?
Yeah, with a great view on the Bash Run below.
It always seems steeper when you look down.
Ready?
Yeah.
Francois Xavier will be head climber for this first stretch.
It's rock solid here.
Good.
Over the course of the ascent, the three men will take turns being head climber, thereby alternating between the most dangerous, but also the most thrilling position, that of leading the team.
Fantastic.
It is often said that mountain climbers, like sailors, are the conquistadors of the useless. Useless or not, any climber will tell you that scaling a mountain has little to do with reaching the top and everything to do with the actual experience of climbing it. In this case, what our three friends are looking to experience is the journey of ice. Since its arrival on Earth in the form of snow to its return to the rivers or oceans a few dozen or a few thousand years later.
Good job. A little break?
Sure. Here should be okay. Nice view of the glacier and of the bridge glacier tongue down in the valley, and the accumulation basin that is the Lillooet ice field.
We can see the glacier's position at the moment, but there's also a very clear demarcation line at the vegetation level, huh?
It hasn't been overrun by vegetation yet because these are recent geological deposits, a few hundred years max. So it's still unstable and vegetation can't quite get a foothold yet. But this gives us a clear idea of where the glacier was not so long ago. When you look at it, it all seems frozen in time, but it actually moves some 100 meters a year.
Like a river of ice.
Yeah, exactly.
And we see what looks like a natural dam holding back this lake. That's the frontal moraine, right?
Right.
From where the glacier used to be.
Exactly. That's the terminal moraine, which will mark out the glacier's ultimate position.
Can we estimate when the glacier arrived at the level of that moraine?
Typically, like in other parts of the Rockies, those terminal moraines date back to the Little Ice Age. This is basically the last period we know of where glaciers expanded, and that was between the 1500s and 1900s.
Okay, I'd like to see that on a map.
Oh, right, you brought a map.
Yeah.
We can see the entire glacier.
And there's no lake here.
Yeah, indeed.
Incredible. The glacier must be up to here now.
Yeah, more or less.
So a good 2 kilometers.
Yeah, a good 2 kilometers. Based on the source data, we can see that this map was drawn between the 70s and 90s. That is, the aerial photos that were used to make the topographical map. So the appearance of that lake is fairly recent. It dates back to just the last few decades.
Ben Peck is a bush pilot. Aboard his seaplane, he flies all over the coast mountains to transport people and supplies to the 4 corners of the province. Today, his mission is to drop off glaciologist Dan Moore of the University of British Columbia at the foot of the Bridge Glacier. It's a trip the scientist makes every year, this time with his assistant, Haley. Dan is sort of like the doctor of the Bridge Glacier. Each year, he comes here to take its pulse.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you. Great. Wow, this looks quite different from the last time I was here. I don't recall that big stream right there. This is so different from the last time we were here. It's like the whole landscape just started falling apart. Yeah, this whole thing's a mess. Yeah, I think if we go down here, drop down here and then cross over there. Yeah, just incredible. It's amazing how quickly stuff can change. So the work that we're currently doing is to try and get a better understanding of the winter snow accumulation and then the summer melt rates. So then we can develop a model to make projections in the future of how the glacier is going to change and how the contributions to river flow are going to change. My role is to go onto the glacier, we drill holes in the ice, we put marked cords down, and then we go back and we can measure the length of the cord that's sticking out of the hole, and we can determine then how much ice is melted. To give you an idea, each of these lengths is a bit over a meter, and so the amount of melt that's happened this year so far is about from me to Haley. Over a single summer, we could have more than this. Well, even up to 6 meters in a really hot summer. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. If you look at the lower limit of the forest up there, about 150 years ago, the glacier filled the valley up to that level. There was almost 500 meters thickness of ice here, so that's like 5 football fields stacked vertically. In more recent time, we know that since 1990, the glacier used to extend down past those icebergs, so 4 kilometers retreat in the last 25 years. Back in the 1970s and 1980s, when glaciologists were doing studies, surveys of the glacier, they had a hut that they built at the top of that hill. And in those days, the glacier was so much thicker, they could just step right off the hill onto the ice to do their surveys. So we're seeing very dramatic changes. In my knowledge, it's the fastest retreating glacier in this part of the world.
Most recently, the climate change story has become the big one, and that's one we were quite unprepared for when I started. It never occurred to us that this was going to be how our own careers were going to be ending as kind of as witnesses to the slow disappearance of glaciers on the Earth's surface and the consequences of that. That was farthest thing from our minds at the time. We were interested in other stuff. In the early days, I was just interested in how thick the ice was, you know. So I was running around with explosives, doing seismology on glaciers, boom, and then seeing how quickly the waves came back and turning that into an ice thickness. So those glaciers were a kilometer thick. There have been many ice ages in the past few million years, And at that time, we thought that we were out of an ice age, which we were and still are. We were looking for this clockwork to continue and slowly enter a new ice age. And I thought that the retreat of those glaciers was probably just what was happening because the end of that ice age. And then it kept going, and the glaciers kept retreating, and it became quite obvious that they were being kind of burned away by the new climate that we have created. Problem really is that it's quite hard to really be sure about these changes because the actual visual changes are quite subtle. That glacier is getting much thinner, and that's something you would not appreciate by just looking at the area of it. Looks about the same, but it's 100 meters thinner than it was, and you don't see that, but it's there. So you get a kind of false reassurance by looking at the landscape. And the computer work I've done with the animation visuals is very interesting because it shows you how misleading your own senses can be too. We know that the flow of a glacier is influenced by the temperature of the ice, by the pressure of the water, by the slope of the glacier, the thickness of the ice, all these things we know. But you can put all that knowledge into physical computer models that imitate in their behavior what glaciers actually do. So I was very interested in how would the glaciers of Western Canada respond to the possible climates of the future. This is the business as usual one, which is not quite a worst case because we're actually behaving worse than the worst case that they imagined right now. But if we continue like this, we can see what happens to the glaciers if we do that. So here we go. 2050, and now what's interesting is everything seems to go haywire at this moment. Everything just goes zot going. And the glaciers almost look as if they've been thrown on a frying pan. They just go. In this worst case scenario, there's no bridge glacier at all. Here what we have is that.
Our adventurers who are still assaulting Mount Bridge are within grasp of the summit, but the mountain has decided otherwise.
This isn't really secure. This wouldn't be a great spot to fall. These rocks are kind of treacherous.
Wow, it's pretty exposed here.
You can really feel the void.
Yeah. Oh, wow, I'm on a big cornice here. Whew, kind of scary, no?
This is a total blast.
Yeah, not quite what we imagined, eh?
Brittle rock, unstable snow. The conditions are simply too dangerous. The three men abandon the climb.
Nature won out, that's all.
Yeah, it wasn't an easy decision.
Yeah, true.
But the conditions were very difficult. It's extremely hot.
The adventurers descend to the relative safety of the ice field. Their disappointment over the failed climb is soon forgotten. A fun descent on skis is apt compensation.
So, we're back on the Lillooet ice field. We're really at the spot where the glacier is forming, where it accumulates all of its water. During winter, it accumulates 5 meters of snow. In the summer, when it's really hot, like now, it melts, so some of it flows down into the valleys. At the end of the year, there's a surplus of about 3 or 4 meters of snow. And, in fact, it's the snow that accumulates here that is compacted and turned into ice. And in the end, the ice is fluid. It can change its shape. So that ice will buckle under its own weight, progressively flowing towards the valleys, creating outlet glaciers, like the one we saw yesterday, the Bridge Glacier.
How much ice is under our feet here?
I would say approximately between 200 to 300 meters thick.
Wow. So if you stuck the Eiffel Tower in the glacier, you'd barely see the top.
True enough. But obviously, as the surface of the ice keeps getting lower because of climate change, the Eiffel Tower would progressively emerge.
Because of your great passion for glaciers, it must be even more intense for you to see them retreat to such an extent, and so fast.
Yeah, of course. But at the same time, the interesting thing, scientifically speaking, is seeing how the systems are changing so quickly. In fact, most of my research is trying to understand how all these systems react to the climate, how they'll evolve based on climate change, to what extent they're important for us, and how much impact they'll have on hydrology and water resources. Because glaciers are obviously a symbol of climate change. They're changing right in front of our eyes. What we don't know yet is how serious those impacts are, and for whom and in what part of the world. But what's clearly disheartening with respect to those regions where the glaciers are retreating is realizing that they'll be gone within a few decades. Then it's more the mountain climber in me that gets upset. The wind seems to be picking up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit windier.
And I don't know if you think so, but...
The wind is stronger than earlier.
Might be a good time to get the kites out.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's blowing in the right direction.
If we manage to cross the whole plateau by kite...
Yeah, it would be a lot easier.
And more fun, too.
Now we have perfect conditions.
It's brilliant, using the wind to cross a glacier.
The wind turning in their favor, the men get out their power kites. If their plan works, with the wind's help, they'll be able to cross the ice field faster than any traditional skier could. Carried along by their power kites, Christophe, Francois-Xavier, and Damien crossed the gigantic Lillooet ice field in record time. Gliding on the snow at over 30 kilometers an hour, the three adventurers take in the immensity of the landscape. The place is a perfect example of what the whole of Canada would have looked like 15,000 years ago. A vast and continuous maze of glaciers spread out from here to the North Pole. The Ice Age is the age of creation, when our landscape was carved and shaped by the immense forces of nature that are glaciers. However, to really understand the hidden mysteries of the ice, you have to relinquish infinitely vast views and focus on the infinitely small.
This should be good.
Almost there.
Yeah. Just this last part here. That should be straight enough. Maybe clear this out a bit. Can you turn on the light?
Sure. I can't wait to see what it'll look like. Ready?
Yeah, you can turn it on. Wow. It's amazing. It's just amazing. See how you can make out all the details.
Wow.
It's an improved version of a typical snow pit used in glaciology. This is how you measure a glacier's state of health. We take out a slice and measure the thickness of the snow that's accumulated on the glacier. Then, we measure the meltwater during the summer season to see how much water was lost. At the end of the year, we compare both results and see if the glacier is gaining or losing mass.
So all these brighter layers represent water infiltrations?
Exactly. Those are water infiltrations. During melting, or when the rain penetrates the surface of the snow, the water will seep deep down into the glacier. And as soon as the water hits a layer that's below 0 degrees, it will freeze and form these lenses. By the end of the summer, you often get these big ice crusts, or ice lenses. And with a bit of practice, it's possible to detect them with a probe.
Okay, let's do this.
See how it keeps going deeper? There's one layer, then another. It won't go any deeper. Now, if I check the measurement, let's see, 220.
So that's just in 1 year?
Yeah, just in 1 year.
That's huge.
During the winter, the glacier gained 4 meters of snow in its accumulation zone. One of the objectives for this type of sample is to convert it into water height. For that, you need to know the snow's density. Snow is a combination of air and ice, so it can have varying degrees of density depending on whether it's new or old snow. So we'll take a sample. Here, hold the scale while I take a snow sample. Then I'll put it in this bag here. Now hook it into the little scale. So how much is that? 140. Which comes out to about 500 grams per liter, or half the water's density. So this year, the glacier gained 2 meters of water in its accumulation zone. What remains at the end of the summer, which hasn't melted and left the glacier by runoff, is known as neve. And that neve will get compacted and eventually form ice.
Tell me, how long does this process of fresh snow to ice take on this glacier?
To form glacier ice, in the case of a temperate glacier, it usually takes 3 to 5 years, compared to glaciers in Arctic or Antarctic zones that can take hundreds of years for fresh snow to be transformed into ice. Now we'll check the crystals that make up the snow. We'll retrieve a crystal sample with this tool so we can examine their shape. That will tell us a lot about the snow transforming process. So we'll see what kind of grain we have. Fresh snow is composed of nice star or needle-shaped crystals. That snow will be transformed by various processes. The wind will break it up into little pieces.
They get compacted.
Exactly. The escaping vapor will also round out the grains, and the meltwater will eventually form ice lenses. It's the combination of those processes that will gradually produce neve, and finally, glacier ice. Now we'll look through the magnifying glass. This is a great example of the grain of melting snow. Big grains grouped together.
No more branches.
The branches are long gone, so it's big clusters of rounded grains. It's spring snow. It's the sort of soft snow that kept us from reaching the top of Mount Bridge, unfortunately, because it's really hot. We can also check the snow's temperature with this thermometer. According to this, the snow is at 0 degrees. It's a spring snow, also known as isothermal snow. It's at 0 degrees, so it's melting. The succession of ice layers suggests that we've had a very mild winter and spring. But to confirm those findings, we'd need historical data. Either that or...
Dig a little deeper?
About 10 more meters, but I suggest...
Yeah, we need to grab some sleep instead.
Exactly. We need to rest up.
Sounds good. Let's go.
Allez.
So powerful and fragile at once. Only a few short decades ago, they seemed to be invincible. Today, a man can see, over the course of his lifetime, a glacier literally disappear under his very eyes. The changes are everywhere around us. We can see them, feel them. The climate is getting warmer, and the glaciers are melting. It's undeniable. Do we still have 10, 50, or 100 years before the last glaciers disappear? And how many meters will the oceans rise? These are basic yet unresolved questions that may well impact the very survival of our species. In the great spectacle that is the melting of the glaciers, the Canadian Rockies are at center stage, and the main star is the Columbia Icefield, the biggest one of them all. It's here that English glaciologist David Rippin has decided to tackle these big questions with help from the latest technology.
We struggle to assess the changes that are going on. Being able to quantify and measure those changes that are going on is a really important thing. When you have such a big body of ice as the Columbia Icefield, that's quite a difficult process to carry out. What I'm doing is utilizing an aircraft and with a camera attached to that, and then flying back and forth over the icefield, gathering thousands and thousands of images. And then we use this technique, structure from motion, to mosaic those images together and build three-dimensional models of the ice surface. And we can do that at really high spatial resolution, hopefully up to centimetric resolution. And if you do that once, and then you do that again, and you do that again, you can look at change at a really high spatial resolution. I stress these are early days results, but it seems to me that the rate of retreat of the Columbia Glacier is increasing. So it is retreating, it is getting smaller at an increasing rate. I feel quite strongly about climate deniers. It frustrates me that people think that this is something that you have the choice whether to believe in or not. It's science. You don't get the luxury of choosing whether you believe in it or not. Our climate is warming and we're having an impact.
Our atmosphere is getting warmer. We're disrupting our climate. These messages sound so familiar, yet so abstract at the same time. How could such puny beings have an impact on the immense planetary climate system? The explanation can be found in the glaciers.
The water molecule is 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 of oxygen. And the oxygen molecule occurs in different isotopic forms, a heavy one called oxygen 18 and a light one called oxygen 16. If you have oxygen 16 and 18 in water vapor and you precipitate it out, the ratio of oxygen 18 to 16 in the precipitation is a function of the temperature of the atmosphere at the time when the precipitation fell. So if you can work your way down an ice core and measure the oxygen 18 to 16 ratio, then you can actually quantitatively reconstruct the atmospheric temperature over the time when the ice was being deposited.
The link between the temperature and the isotopic composition of snow was discovered in the 1960s. It was an astounding discovery. Later, it came to be known as the isotope thermometer. Overnight, humans were able to reconstruct the climate of the past through the simple analysis of ice core samples. At the Dome Sea Boring Station in Antarctica, they were able to go back 800,000 years into the past. The ice has spoken, and the results are described in a now famous graph that reveals, millennium upon millennium, the cyclical succession of ice ages and warmer periods. A knowledge of our prehistoric climate is crucial for a better understanding of our planet. What will even more deeply impact humanity, however, is being able to reconstitute carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere.
Air that was in the snow at the time when it initially gets deposited is caught and it's turned into small bubbles that exist within the ice. So you can look at the ice and you can see it's basically blue, but there's bubbles in it. And then if you can extract the gas from those bubbles, then you can actually analyze what that gas is made up of. And so you can measure things like the amount of carbon dioxide, the amount of methane, the amount of nitrous oxide, all of which are greenhouse gases in these bubbles. And if you have a long enough record, you can look at how those things have fluctuated over time.
There's a perfect and irrefutable correlation between CO2 and the temperature. But now, let's travel toward the present. The levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere have never surpassed 300 parts per million in the past 800,000 years. In the mid-1800s, during the Industrial Revolution, CO2 levels began a meteoric rise and never came down again. Today, we've passed 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, 100 more than the highest peak recorded in the last million years. As for temperatures, there's no more doubt about which way they're heading.
Really symbolically, it's not good to think that we're kind of ruining the place we live. That's part of the loss of glaciers. It's just telling us that as stewards, we're doing a really bad job. But then there are practical sides to this as well. They're providing this extra service of delivering water when we need it.
They build up mass in the winter. You add snow, and then temperatures warm in the summertime, and you generate water by melting that snow and some of the ice. And so that water then reaches the river system. In many parts of the world, we rely on the water from glaciers to keep river levels high. And then, of course, the water in those rivers is used for irrigation of crops, drinking water, in some places industry, transport, hydroelectric power.
The only thing that's keeping the rivers flowing throughout the summer will be these large hydroelectric dams, and they weren't built with the idea that the glaciers would be gone. So they'll be under-engineered for the new job that they have, which would be to regulate the river flow. I don't think there's a way that we can marshal the huge amount of money that's going to be required to deal with all the climate damage that we are setting in play. And then we'll just have to say, too bad, move away, say goodbye to your house, move somewhere else, say goodbye to your livelihood, can't grow stuff here anymore. Those are changes we're not thinking about, but we're certainly putting them into play. The work that we did made a very strong suggestion that the cautious scenarios of low carbon into the atmosphere would bring a reward. Not an absolute perfect reward. We're not going to keep things as they were, but we would have glaciers in the Rockies, glaciers in the Coast Mountains into the future. So I don't think despair is the right thing here, and I don't think that would lead to an improved world if we have a lot of desperate people around. I'd vote for doing something. There's nothing much wrong with the future that isn't burning stuff and putting it in the atmosphere. It doesn't seem there's something ugly about that, and it's not harmful.
For the last leg of their adventure, Christophe, Damien, and FX have made their way to the Squamish Glacier, which neighbors the Lillooet ice field. They're now about to experience the last phase of their great ice journey.
Check this out, guys.
Wow.
What a gigantic hole.
Wow.
So huge.
That sure is deep.
So that's a glacier mill?
Yeah, a former glacier mill. Water no longer flows through it, but we can see water in the bottom.
The water cut into the ice?
Exactly.
And you can see the bottom of the glacier.
You see the river.
You can see the under ice river. We're about, what, 20, 30 meters high?
Let's go check it out then.
Inside?
Yeah.
So we're gonna go down to the bottom?
Yeah, we'll set up a few ice screws and rappel down.
Sure, why not?
Oh, you don't seem too sure.
No, I'm sure.
Christophe, can you help me with the anchors?
Yeah.
3 screws, right?
Yes, 3 screws. And we'll keep digging till we get to the dense ice.
The surface is all rotten.
Rotten by the sun, huh?
Yeah, that crust forms because of the sunlight, the melting, and the refreezing.
That should be good. I'll put in an ice screw.
Yeah, it's summer ice for sure.
Perfect. Now I'll close the carabiners. That's solid.
Well, relatively solid.
Yeah, the rope.
I'll go first.
Okay.
See you down there?
I love it.
Don't forget to smile.
It's really solid after all. It's funny, going down is a bit like reading a history book. You're exploring the history of the glacier.
Yeah, the farther down you go, the older the ice. You can still make out the original layers, the snow accumulation that is compressed and transformed into ice.
See you down there, at the heart of the glacier.
Sounds good to me.
Nice descent, huh?
Super.
Wow.
Nice, huh?
Just gorgeous.
Damien's all about style. Should we go exploring?
Let's do it.
We'll follow the water.
Exactly.
It's amazing when you think about it. We've traced the glacier's great journey from the moment the snow falls on the surface all the way to its melting at the bottom of the glacier.
Yeah, this is the last stretch of the journey for meltwater, and it's joining up with the base of the glacier. This is the glacier's internal plumbing. It's a sort of hydrologic network that evacuates water towards its extremities.
Why completely hidden from the surface world?
Exactly. From the surface, you'd never guess there was so much water under here.
Well, should we see where it leads? We can get through, but it'll be a tight squeeze.
Yeah, it does look quite tight.
Have you ever done any caving?
A few times, but never through such narrow passages.
Can you imagine how many tons of ice there's above us?
And remember, ice has a tendency towards filling any voids, so we shouldn't linger too much.
That would be bad.
But the glacier isn't moving today, right?
It's on a break today.
I hope it's taking a break. The space is opening up here.
Oh, it's barely 20 centimeters high here.
If you can get through, then I can too.
Are you saying I'm fat? I found the exit. Can you hand me my bag?
Yeah. How's it looking over there?
Oh, it's just gorgeous. You'll never have felt so close to a glacier.
I'm pretty close already. Are you sure we can get through?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, this is where glaciologists have won.
I'm in my element. Thanks.
Great.
And look at that. Gorgeous, huh?
That color is crazy.
And those bubbles here are just amazing. Like in 3D.
You mean the air bubbles in the ice?
Yeah, and they're perfectly round.
This seems like a good example of the plumbing you mentioned earlier, Christophe.
Wow, you can clearly see the water flowing down a conduit. It's flowing down to here.
Yeah, just incredible. You can clearly see that water vein.
You can even follow the water all the way from the top to here.
There are a few conduits that split up. One goes in that direction and the other takes a left turn.
It's called an ice vein, right?
Yes, an ice vein or conduit.
It really looks like a blood vessel.
Yeah, it's an arterial network. When the veins become wider, they turn into mills, these long channels that capture all the surface meltwater and transport it towards the base. And then that water will forge a path and create a sub-ice hydraulic network with all these conduit networks that we can see here. I don't know if you remember, but there was very little flow at the surface because in this type of glacier, the major part of the meltwater will infiltrate the cracks and it will then merge with one of these channels at the base of the glacier. And that water lubricates the glacier. That has an extremely important effect because it will reduce resistance to friction, so the glacier will be able to flow out more quickly. In a way, the glacier is rolling along on beads. And that's specific to mountain glaciers because they're warmer, if you will. So there's a lot of water infiltration. They're very dynamic. But it's not the case for all glaciers. In the Arctic, there are cold glaciers that are frozen at the base, so they don't necessarily have this water infiltration problem. So those glaciers last longer because they don't break up at the base. They don't slide along the base.
Check out the size of this boulder.
It's huge.
Do you see that?
Really impressive.
That's really a boulder. It's not part of the glacier's bedrock.
This was carried here by the glacier.
Exactly. This boulder was carried by the glacier. It's been incorporated into the ice.
It shows just how powerful the glacier is.
Only a glacier could transport a boulder this size. Rivers and wind couldn't move such big material. That's why we say glaciers are the main force of erosion on the planet.
Imagine that huge boulder being transported maybe several kilometers downstream just by the force of the ice.
Yeah, maybe it was broken off at the top of the glacier or at the base. It's incorporated into the ice. That's what makes the deposits we saw earlier. You know, those famous moraines that we saw at the extremities of the glaciers that sort of look like rows of sediment? This is where they're formed, basically. So all this material is ripped away and incorporated, pushed to the sides like a bulldozer.
We can see through the ice too.
Yeah, that ice is really impressive.
Very nice.
It's like an aquarium. You can see through it for meters.
Yeah, in fact, the ice is very pure. All the air was ejected by the pressure.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so translucent.
It looks like there's water behind it.
You could almost imagine a fish swimming by.
Yeah. And here there are spots where the ice sort of merged with the rocks.
The ice can behave like a plastic. It can slowly change into another shape. It merged with the rocks here. And you can see there are two sizes of debris. There are fine particles, and then there are rocks. This is known as glacial till, and the finer particles are known as rock flour. That happens when the glacier polishes the rocks like sandpaper.
It's almost like sand, in fact. So these rocks were ground by the glacier?
This is the debris that was caught in the ice that ended up rubbing against the rocks like sandpaper. And it produces this fine blend of sand and silt.
So it's the rocks that are embedded in the ice that rub against the rock?
Exactly, because the ice by itself doesn't cause erosion. There has to be debris inside it, impurities, and it's that debris that will rub against the rocky base.
And that's what hollows out the valleys?
Yeah, it hollows out the valley. That's what makes for big U-shaped valleys.
This is really a unique opportunity to be here at the exact interface between the rock base and the ice. This is exactly where it happens.
Yeah, this is where it happens, so if we were really patient and stayed here for a few days, we'd see it move. We'd eventually see the glacier moving in jerks. Because a glacier can move fast, some 50 to 100 meters per year. But sometimes it jerks forward, so it might not move for a couple of days, and then it could move a whole meter in one fell swoop.
Then we'll have to come back.
Yeah, we'll have to come back.
Christophe, Damien, and Francois Xavier have reached the end of their journey, and so has the ice. It's a bittersweet journey. Many people will say that their children will bear witness the end of the glaciers. But is that really the only possible outcome? Could we dare to hope for a better future for our glaciers?
It's obviously worrisome when you keep track of climate change, when you're monitoring its impacts. It gives you a fairly pessimistic vision of the future. Yet I'm still a lot more optimistic today than I was 5 or 6 years ago. Why? Because I have the feeling that we've finished the phase of identifying the problem and the public awareness phase. Today, the public is well aware of the problem and the facts have been well established. We've seen certain initiatives to decarbonize the economy, and I think we've moved on to the next phase, the problem-solving and action phase.